Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Money Date. My name is Anna, and I think it's a beautiful life. And that's why I come to visit with you every Wednesday to talk about how your finances need to be in order to live a fulfilled life and have less stress. Now, today we're talking about what do young folks need to focus on, okay? Now, I am sure that these tips are going to be useful for all of you, but I thought that this is an important topic to discuss because we're getting into the month of May, which is what I call is a transition month. So there's a lot of graduations happening from high school, from colleges, and I think having the right skills that you can take forward with you when you were starting out are the most important steps. I wish I had more opportunity to learn about these kinds of skills, but I didn't. I actually chose a career in financial planning because I loved the topic, but I've made all kinds of mistakes. So there, I have a whole bunch of tips for you today that I hope that you find useful and gonna spread out the word. As you hopping on, hi Tom, good to have you here. As you hopping on, please share this out. And when you're sharing this out, hi Kelly, good to have you here. Not only share this out, tell your friends and your family why they need to pay attention, why this particular video is something that they need to watch. So I'm gonna get into the discussion about what tips I have for young adults in just a bit. And as for those of you who are watching and coming here on a regular basis, Money Dates are designed to help us and give us a pause so that we can check in and see how our finances are doing. Now, it's interesting that today is the 2nd of the month, so I usually sit down once a month and do sort of a global review of all of my finances. So have I paid my bills? So after I finish a Money Date with you, I'm actually gonna spend a little bit more time working on my finances because guess what? Most of the time, I am involved in planning for other people's lives and what they're trying to accomplish with their money. So, but I wanted to have a structure where I was able to stay on the top of 3 simple things. I talk about these 3 simple things all the time. Number 1 is where my expenses are at. Everybody has a cell phone, right? So you have tools here that are available to all of us, right? So that you can track your expenses. Number 2, what is the income? How much money did I make? I am on a variable income. Depends on how many clients I work with. I know a lot of you are not, but you still need to understand and have a good idea. How much is your paycheck? Is it every 2 weeks? Is it every month? Is it every week? Is it every other week? How much money is actually going into your checking account, right? And then of course, number 3 is you've got to have savings goals. You've got to have financial goals, period. But around financial goals, we always have goals in terms of how much money we are going to save, okay? Now, these 3 things is something that you have to stay on the top of all the time. Let me turn down the music a little bit. So I wanted for myself a structure and reminders to check those 3 simple things. Now, once a month, I sit down and I look at everything a little bit closer, right? Because all of those 3 things I mentioned, I can easily track on my phone. I can easily open up my mint.com app. I have all of that there, okay? And I can check in with myself. I'm not doing it for anybody else, okay? Remember that. You're not doing it for me. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the success of what you're trying to accomplish. Now, what I do every month is that I actually, and because I have a system where all of my bills are paid by the 15th of the month, all I really have to track and stay on the top of my variable expenses. So this is the beginning of the month, and that's when I actually do that global review that I was talking about. So last time when I did it, and I almost started having a little check-ins with myself in terms of how long is it going to take me. So on average, probably about 30 to 45 minutes to really review everything to make sure everything is said and done. And then I get to talk to Yuri. So you have to have a partner or somebody, right, with whom you can discuss these kinds of ideas. Progress, my friends, right, is what we're after. It's not, even though I'm asking you to stay on the top of these small, I think of them as small details, right, of how much money we've spent, what kind of income we've earned, and we're staying on a track with our savings goals. And if you know me by now, a lot of this stuff can be automated, and that's the beauty of it. So the fact that we can actually focus on progress is even more exciting to me. So that's the idea of money dates. Now, I always wanted to share with you an exciting topic, and so I wanted to talk about what should young adults, right, think about, because I know, and you know as well, that personal finance is not taught in schools, okay? There are not specific requirements in high school, right, for you to take money management 101 course. There's not a specific requirement in college, right, to take a course like that. Unless, right, and when I graduated, there was not one that you needed, unless you were part of a financial planning track, you didn't have to take a money course. But the fact is that the minute you enter the real life, the minute you grow up, and some of us actually haven't grown up, we might be in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, it's time for that. So I'm going to talk about a couple of tips with you about how can you go about having a structure, being smart around your finances, because there are so many different tools that you can utilize. Now, for those of you, hi Kelly, good to have you. Hi Mom, good to have you here. As you joining this live stream, please share it out. I'd love for your friends and family to benefit. Also, before I dive into the actual discussion, let's talk about a money win. Now, I have one that's kind of non-traditional and I'm excited about it. A money win is something that took a positive place in your life over the last 7 days. All right, so I'm going to talk about one that doesn't quite happen to me very often because I got a busy schedule. I travel quite a bit, but I was actually able to spend a whole weekend not working. Okay, I always brag about the fact that I work on Saturdays because it's one of the days that I get a lot done. But all last week I was on the East Coast, lots going on, and I just really felt like I needed to not work. And believe me, for the person like I am, where I'm always on the go, always want to accomplish more things, having Saturday and Sunday off, no work, it was actually fantastic. Monday morning, Yuri and I went to the gym and I was getting ready for work, and I was like, Yuri, I actually feel rested. I feel like I have enough energy to go about the week. So I don't know, there's definitely something about taking the time off, right? Whatever it is, however it is long you need. I'm a strong believer that you don't need a whole lot of time off. You just need to do it more frequently. So that's my win for the week. I feel good. It's Wednesday. It's been crazy busy, but I feel like I can get through with the rest and mental recharge that I got, not having to focus on work, right? And I don't know about you, but I feel like these kinds of rest periods should be taken more often. So Yuri and I are talking about maybe doing more of that, maybe once a quarter, having just a complete weekend off. So that's my money win. But as you're joining me live, please let me know what is good for you. Anything, right? You have to pause and find these positive moments, okay? Because if you don't, guess what? It's going to be very difficult for you to get through whatever it is that you're working on. And unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, personal finances, money is closely tied in to everything that we do. So think about it and start giving yourself, this is a reward, my friends, okay? Start giving yourself these positive gratitude types of moments where you can appreciate. Hi, Megan, good to have you. Where's my nephew? He's so cute. He's 1 month old. Oh my gosh, my friends, this is another money win for the week. It's not quite mine, but I thought I shared. He's so cute and growing up so fast. So, all right, let's dive into what are some of the tips I want young adults to think about. I know that, and I remember this time, right, when I was graduating high school, right, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going off to college, it's a big deal. And it was a big deal, right? And then college, went by pretty fast, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm ready to enter the adult world, right? Now I'm, independent. I'm gonna start making my own money. But none of these things came to me later, unfortunately. So I want you to think about what can you tell your loved ones, the ones that are at that point where it's not too late, or it's not even, there's no such thing as too late, right? But it's a perfect time to start adapting these habits, because personal finance management is all about habits, okay? And the better your habits are, the more success you're going to have. So let's dive into it, okay? Now, the very first tip I have for you is that you've got to have an idea of what your expenses are. So we're going to create or set up a spending or a budget plan. And then we're going to make sure that we have emergency reserves, or what I call a curveball account. Now, this is the foundation that you will not believe how many of my clients, even in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, like the age is not a defining factor, but how many people do not have this in place. Two simple things. And that's why I come here to see you every Wednesday, so that I can remind you, know where you're spending your money, right? Have a tracking mechanism in place. Now, emergencies happen to all of us, my friends, but do you know what happens when emergencies come up? Most of us are actually not prepared. So if we know what our expenses are, what our income is, we have a good spending plan in place, and the younger you are, the less responsibilities you have. You don't have a mortgage to pay, right? You may be still living with your parents, or you're sharing a lot of these expenses. So it's much, much easier for you to operate within that system. So emergency reserves, or I call that a curveball account, 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses. So think about where are you spending your money. That's why I think the first step is to see what your expenses are. And then let's say it's $2,000 or $5,000. So at least 3 months of that is what you need to put in emergency reserves, okay? I know that you guys are gonna regret of not doing these things sooner, because this is how you get in trouble with racking up credit card debt. This is how you get in trouble into not having a clear idea. What kind of jobs can you search for? What if you had an opportunity to move across the country, right? It was a perfect option for you to start a new career, or whatever the reason is, but you had no savings to do any of that. You know how limiting that is? I don't want you to be in that position, and you have all the tools that you need. We're gonna talk later about how can you make sure that you actually have enough income to cover all of this. But at least if you first start having those precise thoughts that you are in charge, that's it. The bottom line, that you are in charge of your finances. Now, number 2 tip is to break up with debts, okay? I'm gonna repeat it again. Number 2 tip for young adults is to break up with debts. All right, do you know what I mean by that? And for those of you who are about to graduate or have graduated already, student loans is number 1 debt amongst young adults. Now, one of the trouble that I got when I graduated from college, I did have a student loan, not a very big one, so thanks to my parents, but I had a student loan, and I had a credit card debt. You know, I didn't understand how these things worked, right? I understood I had to pay it back, but it was not a priority for me, because I thought that when I graduate, I'm gonna make a lot more money, right, than working part-time jobs I had while I was in college. Well, guess what? It's quite a bit of difficult start when you are out and about trying to start your life, making decisions. Maybe you want to move or accept a job that pays less money because it's a great opportunity for you to grow. You have these debts, looming on the top of you every month. Now, of course, student loan debt is much, much longer kind of a approach and project. But at the very minimal, if you have debts that are what I call consumer debts, and they come from consumption, things like, I don't know, buying clothes, going on trips, and things like that, you need to focus on paying those off. It is the most basic tip, but I think it's the most instrumental part of being smart with debt. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use debt, because it is one of the tools to help you if you ever start a business. Right? That's going to be one of the things to help you leverage. Leverage is the word. Leverage is when you use other people's money. Now, in context of borrowing other people's monies or banks to pay for things like clothing, entertainment, that's not a very smart use of that opportunity, right? We can talk more about what it is and how do you apply it when you actually have a business, or you want to start a business, or you buy a first home, right? So all of those things come to play. But if you don't have your ducks in a row, it's going to be very difficult to get there. So don't forget that if you are finding yourself in that situation, breaking up with debt should be number 2 on your list, okay? Because by then, you already should have an idea, if you have a spending plan in place, of what and how much more beyond what your minimum payments are you can actually devote to something like that, okay? Now, I also would argue that if you have debts that need to be paid off, think about the ones that are more expensive, right? The ones that have highest interest rates. Those are the ones that you need to focus on first, right? Because all we're trying to do is be smart and not overpay in different in interest rates as we're paying these debts down, okay? Now, having debts is not entirely a bad position, as I already said, but number 3 tip for young adults is that you need to start building credit, okay? Because again, there are gonna be plenty of situations in your life where having a credit history and having a solid credit score is going to be instrumental to getting what you want. From renting your first apartment to getting a job. By the way, employers often check your credit report and credit score. Do you know why? It's a very simple reason. Because credit report and the credit score is the indication of how much responsibility you take with your finances. Do you pay, very simple things. Do you pay your bills on time? Can you manage a load of debt and not have to, overcharge your credit cards? Are you paying your student loans back? Those are the things that, when they're combined, constitute a full, comprehensive financial plan, right? Even though you've never really put together a formal one. So debt and having a solid or beginning to build a solid credit report is something to think about. Now, if you don't have any of those things just yet and you're thinking about, how about looking around and exploring how you can get one credit card, okay? Now, there are different types of debts that will help you build your credit report. One of them being a revolving debt, such as a student loan debt, because it's going to continue going on and you're going to pay it off. Now, you're going to have a credit card that also can be used to help with that. Now, for some of my clients, right, and their children who are starting out, I found it useful to be actually, to begin building your credit report is to have, for example, someone maybe add you as an authorized user on their account, right? So that you can piggyback on what they've established, right? The credit limits that they have, for example, in a credit card. You're not gonna get their credit history, right? Because you're gonna start building your own. But that's one way to start actually getting in the weeds. So think about that, because I guarantee you there's gonna be times when that's gonna become very, very important. Now, tip number 4 is one of my favorite ones. And I can't emphasize enough. I wish I had much more understanding about it when I was younger. It's not too late for me, but I wish somebody really drilled this into my head. And it comes down to this: pay yourself first. I'm going to repeat this again because it needs to be something that you kind of sink in. Pay yourself first. So what does that mean? It means that every time you get paid, whether you have a side hustle job, or you have a job that pays you an hourly wage, or you have a job that pays you a salary, the very first thing you do is that you pay yourself. And that means that you begin with not allotting the money to pay for your expenses, but more, how can you save? How can you take of whatever the paycheck or that pay, and immediately, the minute you get it, it goes into your savings account. If you instill this mentality of paying yourself first, it's gonna resolve all of your issues that you're ever gonna have, because we can all learn to live on less, right? So if we have this mentality that not the government, even though taxes are going to be taken out of your paycheck first. You know, Uncle Sam is pretty smart. So taxes are going to be taken out first. But if that's the case, let it be, right? You've got to be stay in compliance, right? You don't want to have trouble with taxes. But if the number two thing you can do is I will allocate savings, right? It's going to get you way, way, way ahead of everybody. Because the more money you start making, and it's going to happen, right? The more opportunities you're going to have with the amount of monies that you've saved up. If anything you learned today, this is the golden tip that you will ever get from somebody who's been doing it for a good 15 years at this point. So now the other concept that I think kind of goes hand in hand with paying yourself first is anytime, so the next time you go to a, I don't know, anywhere, a grocery store, mall, think about, and you have a temptation to buy something, think about this and ask yourself a question. Do I really want this? I don't know, whatever it is. Or do I really need it? So this balancing act between a want and a need is something is going to keep you in line. So if you're finding out after a while, and I swear this is one of the tools that I use for myself, right? There's a lot of temptation, and you know, I want to buy this or I want to buy that. So I pause. It's a very quick pause, and I ask myself a question: do I really need this? If I don't have an immediate yes to this question, right? Say I need this, then I don't buy it. And then I ask myself a second question: do I really want this? Obviously, the answer will almost always will be yes, right? Because I'm tempted, I want it. But if my need overweight the fact that I don't really need it, then I move on. Now, there's another side to this equation, is that if 24 hours later I keep thinking about this, right, then most likely I need to find ways. It still does not get me in the category of if really needing it, but I'm gonna consider ways how I can actually get it. So again, this saved me a million times before when I was put in a situation of, okay, do I really want to buy this? And it's an impulsive kind of decision, or let me ponder on it. And the more time I gave myself, the better I was of not having to buy something without being emotional about it. And of course, I mean, it's not always a perfect situation, but I can work on it. So wants versus needs is one of the tools, and paying yourself first. One of the examples of paying yourself first, so that you actually have that solidified in your mind, is emergency reserves, or what I call a curveball account. So if you can build that, it's going to get you much, much further than most people in this country. Do you know that 75% of Americans have zero, can you see, zero emergency reserves? Zero. So what that means, that when there's an emergency for them, they reach for the credit card, or they can't handle the emergency. And that's why this paycheck to paycheck idea is threatening. It's a threat. And this is something you can also change. Now, my last tip for you for today is to focus on getting insurance coverages that are appropriate for where you are, right? And I want you to think about, you're going to start making money, right? And so there's a couple of, I have three types of insurance coverages that I think it's important for you to have. Number one is obviously health insurance, right? Because I want you to think about, before I get into the actual types of insurance coverages, think about you starting out, and you want to make sure that you cover yourself from catastrophic events, okay? And this could be all kinds of situations. I'm not going to go into describing these things, but catastrophic events are those events that are going to cost a lot of money because there's someone or something that caused that to happen, and there's a lot of damage. Now, you can position yourself to prevent those things, but you can also, there's sometimes a risk that you just cannot handle financially, that's where you get insurance. So if you can think about those situations, then the next three things I'm going to discuss are going to make a lot of sense. So number one is health insurance, right? Obamacare, as much as we have love-hate relationship with it, is a system that allows everyone to get insurance coverage. You may still be getting insurance coverage through your parents because you're finishing up college or you're on their plan. Maybe your employer is going to offer that coverage. It doesn't matter. Or you have to go in an open market and buy that policy for yourself. The idea is that I'm trying to get to you is that have the basic coverage because you never know what's going to happen. So that's number one. Number two is disability coverage, because disability coverage, and again, this is one of the policies, I've talked about this before, this is one of the types of the coverage that most likely your employer will provide, okay? But a good example of how you can think of it is that, think about yourself. You are your own most valuable asset. Your abilities to earn income exceed by far any kind of amount of savings you're going to make. So ability to earn income. Disability insurance protects you in cases where you get sick, you get hurt, and you can't work. So at least, right, consider having long-term disability in place, because the issue that I'm concerned about is you being out of work and not being able to support your lifestyle and save for the goals that you have, okay? And then the last one, for most of you who are in the young category, or those of you who choose not to own your own property, right, need to think about renter's insurance, and for one particular reason, liability protection. Renter's insurance is used to cover incidents, right, and situations where you might be liable for whatever damages it is you cost to others, but because in those kinds of circumstances your assets are exposed, renter's insurance provides that additional liability protection. Okay. Now, there's other things that it covers, and that includes your personal property and things like that. But I want that from the standpoint because you're gonna be working hard, you're gonna be saving, right? Because we talked about you putting in place the idea of paying yourself first. So your assets are going to grow. That's where that kind of protection, it's very inexpensive. Very inexpensive, right? It's probably 2 cups of coffees that's going to buy you an insurance policy that's going to cover you, and all of your possessions and a decent liability amount for the month. So think about that. Now, I think these are good starting points. If you found these useful, for those of you joining me, please share these out. Before I close, I want to ponder, and I want you to think about the fact that if there's one thing that you can implement today, think about that. A lot of these things are going to take a while, but take one step at a time and get yourself in the right mindset of adopting habits that are going to be almost, it's like waking up in the morning and brushing your teeth. You don't even think about it. That's what I'm trying to do. I wish I had these skills when I was younger. I really do. But there's no regrets. I just look around and I say, who's out there that I can show that these things are possible, and they don't require a degree in rocket science, and they're just really simple things. They're not easy, but they're simple that you can implement on a daily basis. That's the beauty of being smart with your finances. Thanks everyone for joining me. I will see you next week. And again, I appreciate you tuning in. Bye for now.